As we continue going south on 24th Street, we come to Memorial Stadium. I don't think there's hardly any of us that haven't been here to watch a Big Red game, or later on a Northern Husky game. Some exciting Friday evenings were spent here, and many of us played here, including me. The stadium is pretty much the same today as it was years ago, although there's been some changes, especially to the entrance. This is the stadium that I remember, at least the front of it, but this is what it looks like today. Looking down from Google Satellite, there would appear to be a focus point right at the entrance that didn't used to be there. And here we see it at the street level. I think we all are guilty of forgetting that this stadium isn't just a place to play football. This stadium is a memorial to the members of the armed forces that died serving their country. I'd like to share this little film clip that I'm going to show next. It gives you a pretty good idea of what it's all about.
We're standing in front of a wall with a lot of names on it. Obviously, it's memorial on purpose. Give us a little bit of history of why it came to be known as Memorial Stadium and how this facility came to be.
Well, in 1945 is when it really started. A gentleman named Brick Fowler, who was a legend in Port Huron, who was the district athletic director, former coach at Port Huron High, and there was only one school at the time, of course. And he got together with some local businessmen, and they decided to do something to honor the veterans of World War II, especially those who had lost their lives. So they decided to go with building the stadium. So the fruition was that it came to fruition in about 1948 when it was finished. And the biggest thing was that these guys got together in a period of about 3 weeks. They raised $113,000 and a total of $300,000 to begin work on the stadium. And the stadium was built with a clubhouse, and behind the clubhouse at that time was where the original pallets with the names on it was placed. Well, nobody really got to see it back there. Over the years, people kind of lost the idea of what the memorial was all about, who was it dedicated to, and those kind of things. So through the auspices of the voters of Port Huron, when they passed the bond issue, we were able to move it to the front of the building, right off 24th Street, right in front of the stadium, so everybody when they come into the stadium can walk right by it and see the names that are listed on these plates here. It's a beautiful, beautiful setting, and it was well deserved and well worth the money and time that was spent to do this.
I think this next little film clip is even better because it shows a Port Huron coach talking to his players about the importance of this stadium and why they should know what it means to play here.
The name of this stadium is Memorial Stadium. It's a memorial to those soldiers in World War II who gave the ultimate sacrifice. They gave their lives so that we could play football on this field. And every time that you go out on this field, I want you to think about this. All of these guys were from Port Huron High School. So when you think about what you got to do tonight, and every single time you walk on that stadium, think of the privilege that you have. So when you go on that field, you're not only playing for your high school, not only playing for yourself, not only playing for your families, not only playing for your community, you're playing for these guys.
And it showed in the first video clip that we saw that this was a vision that some of the local businessmen had in Port Huron. More than just a stadium, but a sporting complex. In fact, it was called the Memorial Recreational Park Sporting Complex, which consisted of softball fields, baseball fields, track, tennis courts, even a wading pool. It went from a plan to reality. This is what that complex looks like today. Even though the stadium is over 70 years old, there's very few high school stadiums in Michigan that can match it today. This is what the stadium looked like shortly after it was built in 1948. It was finished, started in 1945. And here's a fellow overlooking the progress of the work on the stadium. The guest of honor at the breaking ground ceremony was Admiral Frederick Sherman, better known by his nickname Ted. Here you can see him turning over the first shovelful of dirt to break ground for the stadium. This was November 11, 1945. Originally, I was going to stop the segment here on Memorial Stadium, but as I did research on Admiral Sherman, I found out something very interesting. He was not a bureaucratic admiral sitting in the Pentagon doing paperwork. He was a true American hero. He received not one, not two, but 3 Navy Crosses. And I think he deserves to have his story told. Frederick Sherman was born in Port Huron in 1888. He attended Port Huron High School before his appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. At Annapolis, he won his Navy N in lacrosse. He was also runner-up for the boxing championship in 1908-1909 and won the Thompson Trophy for the sailing championship. After graduation, June 10, 1910, he had consecutive duty on several battleships, the Montana, Ohio, and Maryland. Keep in mind, these are World War I battleships, not like the ones we're used to seeing. Upon detachment from the U.S. Maryland in 1914, he was ordered to the USS Cheyenne, and he went to 3 different submarines, and it was in the 07 that he assumed command when he was commissioned in July 1918. The USS 07 was engaged in patrol duties in the Atlantic during World War I. He was awarded the Navy Cross for duty in that submarine during World War I with the following citation: for distinguished and heroic action as commanding officer of the USS 07 engaged in the important, exacting, and hazardous duty of patrolling the waters infested by enemy submarines, destroyers, and mines, protecting vitally important convoys of troops and supplies, and in offensive and defensive actions, vigorously and unremittingly prosecuting against all forms of enemy naval activity. Sherman was transferred to command of Destroyer Division I in February of 1934. Next came something I thought was unusual for a captain of a warship. In 1935, he reported for flight training at the Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida, and designated Naval Aviator in 1936. Once I found out why they were doing this, it made more sense. He assumed command of the USS Lexington in 1940. When it came out of dry dock, it was designed to be a battle cruiser, but then it was converted into being an aircraft carrier. And these are the great minds behind it, I guess. In this photo, they're holding a model of a battle cruiser. And then below that, they're saying this is what it could be. It could be an aircraft carrier. I mean, aircraft carriers were brand new. They didn't have aircraft carriers before this. There was no plan that they could fall back on and say, well, this is our history with aircraft carriers. This is how you attack and how you defend and so forth. They were charting new waters in more ways than one. This is the USS Lexington, and you can see this was in the early days for sure. Just look at the planes on the flight deck. These are not single-wing planes. These are double-wing planes. It was very much used in World War I. At the time of the sudden outbreak of World War II, the Lexington, together with the USS Enterprise, was at sea near Midway. When word of the attack on Pearl Harbor was received, the 2 carriers engaged in a prolonged search for the Japanese ships, which launched the attack. But the enemy forces succeeded in escaping in a weather front. Moving to the South Pacific sometime later, the Lexington was attacked by a large formation of enemy horizontal bombers. Sherman was awarded a Gold Star in lieu of the 2nd Navy Cross for distinguished service as commanding officer USS Lexington on February 20, 1942, when that ship was attacked by 18 Japanese bombers. The citation further states in part, as a result of the brilliant performance of the fighting squadrons under his command, the outstanding manner in which he coordinated and timed the employment and relief of his combat patrols, and his own expert handling of his ship, 16 of the 18 enemy bombers were destroyed without damage to the USS Lexington. The Lexington, still under Admiral Sherman's command, participated in the Battle of the Coral Sea in 1942. This battle was the first major engagement in naval history in which surface ships did not exchange a single shot. It was a battle between aircraft based on carriers. In this engagement, the Japanese were turned back from the prospective invasion of Australia, and the vital supply line to the Southwest Pacific were saved. During this battle, the Lexington was the principal target of the Japanese air attacks, and she was hopelessly damaged after her planes had accounted for numerous enemy aircraft and ships, including the carrier Soho. The Lexington was later sunk by torpedoes from the United States destroyer. Admiral Sherman was the last to leave his ship and was boat hooked out of the sea onto a cruiser. For exceptionally meritorious conduct during action against enemy Japanese forces and the Battle of the Coral Sea, he was awarded the Legion of Merit with Combat V. The following video is from a newsreel clip that appeared in local theaters that I'm sure gave many residents of Port Huron a lot of anxiety over Admiral Sherman, as well as the other 2,000 sailors that were aboard the ship.
The U.S. aircraft carrier Lexington was a price and sacrifice paid in the winning of the Battle of the Coral Sea. This is how the carrier launched her planes to fly into a battle in which ships fought against each other with planes alone. Lexington became the principal target of Japanese attack. In spite of skillful handling, the flagship of Admiral Fitch was hit by at least 2 bombs and torpedoes. Still pictures tell the last few moments of the 33,000-ton carrier, which, shortly after the order to abandon ship was given, blew up with a fearful explosion after fire had reached the torpedo supply. A dramatic movie camera record which reveals for the first time the death struggle of the 33,000-ton aircraft carrier. After successfully weathering attack after attack by Jap dive bombers, internal explosions finally spell her doom. With smoke and flames spouting from the carrier, more than 2,000 of her crew abandoned ship. The end of a great ship, yet her loss was avenged 4 times over a few weeks later. Some weeks later, another and greater defeat than the Coral Sea engagement was inflicted on the Japanese, when action was joined off Midway Island. Out of some 54 Jap vessels employed, 4 out of the enemy's 5 aircraft carriers were sunk with all their aircraft, and 2 heavy cruisers and 3 destroyers went down. In all, nearly a third of the force wiped out by the men who remembered Pearl Harbor.
I kind of miss those newsreels, but that's what you had before internet and TV. That's how you kept up with the news. You had to go to the theater. Shortly after the loss of the Lexington, he was advanced to the rank of Rear Admiral and became Assistant Chief of Staff to the Commander-in-Chief, United States Fleet and Chief of Naval Operations. Admiral Sherman led his carrier forces in a series of raids in 1943 on enemy bases throughout the South and Central Pacific. His planes accounted for the destruction or damaging of 46 ships and nearly 350 aircraft during the comparatively short period from the 1st of November 1943 to the 22nd of February 1944. Although his ships were in enemy waters constantly, none were damaged and aircraft losses were light. Throughout this tour of duty and a subsequent period of combat, Admiral Sherman compiled a brilliant record of leading naval air units in many first strikes against enemy strongholds. And his last Navy Cross was written up like this. I'll let you read this at your leisure because this video is getting a little long. In 1946, he became commander of the entire 5th Fleet. In 1947, he was relieved of all active duty pending his retirement. Admiral Sherman died following a heart attack on the 27th of July, 1957, at San Diego, California. I thought it was important that you know who this man was that was shoveling dirt at Memorial Stadium. He was another Port Huron boy who made us proud. Well, that pretty well covers Memorial Stadium, although there has been one update. In 2017, the stadium got new bleachers. So gone are those long, hard boards we used to sit on, and replaced with nice aluminum ones, which I'm sure are no softer. The bleachers are pretty colorful. All red on one side representing Port Huron High, and all blue on the other side, representing Northern High. Well, I thought we'd get to the high school in this video, but it's not going to happen. But we'll definitely get to the high school in our next video, so join me then.